you have any idea how powerful God is? Have you ever heard of a teacher like him, or has anyone ever had to tell him what to do, or correct him, saying, "You did that all wrong"? Remember then to praise his workmanship, which is so often celebrated in song. Everybody sees it. Nobody is too far away to see it. From the book of Job. He orders the snow blanket the earth. No one can escape the weather. It's there, and no one can escape from God. Wild animals take shelter, crawling into their dens, when blizzards roar out of the north and freezing rain crusts the land. It's God's breath that forms the ice. It's God's breath that turns lakes and rivers solid. From the psalmist, when your finger, God, with your finger you opened up springs and creeks and dried up the wild floodwaters. You own the day, you own the night. You put stars and sun in place. You laid out the four corners of the earth, shaped the seasons of summer and winter. God asks Job, after Job's huge winter of a struggle, "Have you ever traveled, Job, to where snow is made, seen the vault where hail is stockpiled? Who do you think is the father of rain and dew, the mother of ice and frost? You don't for a minute imagine these marvels of weather just happened, do you? Do you?" Wednesday afternoon, I went to the Weaselhead Nature Preservation Park. That's officially what it's called. We just call it the Weaselhead. To try and experience and walk into and take in some winter. And I went there with a few questions. And you know my questions already. Why, God, did you make this? Why this season of such cold and snow and its frosty nature? Is there something through the particularities of winter, God, that you want to say to us directly and about who you are? Often people of faith will look at something like the season of winter and in correlating it to God say, well, you look at winter, how can you say there is no God? And that's a good correlation, but I don't think it goes far enough. Winter doesn't just tell us that there's a God. Winter, I think if you listen, if you can quiet yourself down enough and get still enough to listen, tells you what that God, our God, is like. Like how when you see a Van Gogh painting and you look at it, and if you know paintings at all, you know that's a Van Gogh. Or if you're a Canadian and you've seen a Tommy Thompson painting and you look at that and you just know it's a Tommy Thompson. Winter is your handiwork, God. So, what does it, in its nature, teach me about your nature, your imagination, your brilliant mind, and your gracious, huge heart? Those are tough questions in a week to try to wrap your head around it. Even a week of thinking, I don't think I even came close to figuring it out. But a few things sort of struck me as I took that walk through the Weaselhead. That makes walking through the Weaselhead on a Wednesday afternoon church work, which is a pretty great job. The first thing was that God created a season that rests. A season where nature rests. Trees certainly rest, and the ground rests under its blanket, and the waters in many places rest during winter, and many animals will also get into their dens, like we read and heard in Job, and rest. And all of that rest reminds me and reminds us of a God who rests. In the book of Genesis, it says, "By the seventh day, God had finished his work of creating, and on the seventh day, he rested from all his work. And God blessed the seventh day. He made it a holy day because on that day he rested from his work." All the creating God had done. This is the story of how it all started. of heaven and earth when they were created. So winter whispers rest. As I'm driving here behind some idiot on 26th Avenue who doesn't know that I got to get to church to preach about the silence and solitude of winter, I just opened my window and felt it. You might have felt it this morning. Just rest. Like, relax. Take a season. Take a breath. You've felt it on those really blanketed mornings, you know. There's a new acoustic in the air. And if you slow down, you can hear him whisper, "Come to me. Find rest for your souls." Creation, the world, nature rests. And you are God's created, and God rested, and you're made in the image of God, so you ought to rest. And so I'll whisper a season for 8 months long in Calgary to remind you to rest. Regular rest comes around every year, every week, that seventh day rest. Unavoidable rest. It falls down on you whether you want it or not and surrounds you. A gift, a snow day kind of rest. I did a word search on winter in the Bible earlier this week, and a whole bunch of verses in the Bible where winter is cited, but this one caught my attention, not really because it teaches anything about winter, but it teaches me about whom made it. They, the disciples and Jesus, were celebrating Hanukkah just then in Jerusalem. It was winter, and Jesus was strolling in the temple across Solomon's porch. The Jews circling him said, "How long are you going to keep us guessing? If you're the Messiah, tell us straight out." But it was that one little phrase. Jesus is walking along with his disciples. It was winter. Middle Eastern winter, but cold to them, and a different season, and a lot of the same messages about dormancy and things sleeping. But Jesus experienced winter, and surely Christ knew how to read the seasons. Surely Christ, who was the intermediary in the creation of all things, knew what he was doing and what he meant and what his Father meant when winter was conceived of and birthed. Jesus, through all kinds of parables, showed us that he knew how to listen to nature's whispers. Look at the seed. Look at the wine. Look at the vineyard. Look at that person who acts that way. Jesus could read creation and knew what it meant. And he understood that seasons change. And he knew that by making his introduction, by coming to us on this planet, the seasons had changed. He was ushering in a new season. And sometimes he was frustrated with religious people who had no idea how to read the seasons, people like us. Then Jesus turned to the crowd and he said, "When you see clouds coming in from the west, you say, 'Storm's coming,' and you're right. And when the wind comes out of the south, you say, 'This will be a hot one,' and you're right." Frauds. You know how to tell a change in the weather, if we even know how to do that. You know how to tell a change in the weather. So don't tell me you can't tell a change in the season, the God season we're in right now. Christ ushered in a new season, a God season, a death and resurrection season, a deep "I will care for you and be with you and hold you in the cold of your life" season, a rest season. Can you see it today? And are you listening to his voice?